Hello and welcome to 7 Minutes. The recognition of women in areas of public law, including specifically the judiciary, has significantly improved following the second wave of feminism. But structural impediments in this area still remain. Amendments to the Family Law Act 1975 attempted to address the silences of women and experience of femininity that exists in the Constitution and across the legislation. Despite this, experiences of modern women in the criminal justice system, specifically as victims of domestic violence, reflect the gendered nature of the issue and the inadequacy of legal responses to such. Tonight, we meet Judge Jody, the feminist judge taking the world by storm. She's smart, she's strong, and she's a woman.
We run this mother. Run this mother, girl.
Well, Jody, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me here, Molly. I'm stoked to be here discussing the positive impact of feminist thought in contemporary judicial proceedings. Did you know that roughly 85% of those having experienced domestic violence are women?
Wow, what a statistic! It seems like women are really involved in the justice system in this sense, particularly in the context of domestic violence.
Definitely. The issue of domestic violence at the rate of which women experience it gained recognition in the legal systems in the 1970s.
Really?
Whilst it's great that domestic violence as a gendered issue was actually acknowledged by lawmakers at the time, what we've seen since is a real implementation issue. So whilst laws often do reflect conscious attempts to create and maintain gender equality, when it comes to judges implementing them in a courtroom, there is a lack of genuine understanding of the issue. What happens is that elements of experience of domestic violence or other gendered issues such as sexual assault are categorized as being insignificant.
Have you been a victim of domestic violence yourself, Jody? What differentiates your judgment style from the category of male judges that you've spoken about?
Whilst I haven't been a victim of domestic violence personally, no. But I am a woman. I'm also a feminist, which means that I have a different understanding of what it means to be a woman and how women's issues are experienced. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I know. And I guess the Marcus perspective of those oppressed in a society have a more comprehensive understanding of its operation because they can identify with it in all its faults, holds true in this very context.
Do you think that your proclamation of having an understanding of the way in which women experience the world, in contrast with men, will lead you to implement judgments that are biased against men?
Well, no. Feminist judging is not about being biased against men. Instead, incorporating authentic understanding of the female experience into judgments. This doesn't mean changing the way in which the law is applied. I'm still passionate about maintaining the law and observing practical constraints on judicial decision making by adhering to precedent, particularly so that I can maintain credibility as a judge. I think the value of feminist judging is not exclusively in the impact of particular judgments that I make, but instead in the symbolic nature of my role. Feminism informs my worldview as a female, and it is symbolic that I'm able to share this worldview in a traditional male-dominated position, just as male judges have done before me.
So, in what ways does being female or your identification with the title feminist judge influence your way to form judgments?
I am proud to introduce a more empathetic and inclusive approach to the law in the course of my judgments. As a woman, I love that I am able to acknowledge and validate the experiences of women, particularly as domestic violence victims, that have typically been ignored, that I can understand and sympathise with the diversity and experiences of women in light of cultural and other factors, and identify with experiences of discrimination and stereotyping on the basis of gender that many victims of this form of crime experience.
Well, we're going to hear now from another perspective on feminist judging. Doug Stanley from Parramatta was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment by Judge Jody for physically assaulting his former partner in an act of what he claimed to be self-defense. We're crossing live now to Parramatta Correctional Centre. Hi, Doug.
G'day, mate. G'day, mate. G'day, mate.
Thanks for joining us, Doug. We're really interested on your perspective of the role of feminist judging in courts and perhaps how the concept of feminist judging influenced your trial.
Yeah, well, I guess you could say I wasn't really given a fair trial. The judge gave me a longer sentence because she reckons women are good and men are bad. My missus herself even said I never hit her that hard. I was definitely revoked a couple of years earlier. The judge would have let me defend myself if I said I was provoked. Seems like they just want to lock me up for being a bloody man.
Judge Jody, do you have any reflections on that?
Well, I guess a major challenge to feminist judging is eradicating the public perception, which is actually informed by modern media, that feminism means man-hating, because almost all feminists just want to achieve equality. In a legal sense, that means applying the law equally to all offenders. And I think this means, given the historical oppression of women in a legal, social and political sense, being mindful of all experiences of all women. In Doug's case, that particular understanding was given, and I found that there was an extensive history of violence and emotional abuse in his relationship with his spouse that informed the sentence I gave him. You can't argue that feminist judging doesn't add a new perspective to something that corrects some gendered bias throughout legal history. And the effect of this is definitely positive because it makes for a more inclusive legal system.
Thanks, Jody. That's all we have time for tonight. Tune in next week for another awesome episode of 7 Minutes.